Orchestral music production is a great mystery to demystify. People tend to have lots of questions about it and there aren't lots of resources to learn from, so I personally decided to open this channel where I share tutorials, where I answer people's most common questions about orchestral music. Now, the number one biggest question I see posted on the internet is this: what are the best orchestral libraries? What is the best orchestral library for brass, for piano, for strings, for choir, for percussion, woodwinds, trailer sound effects? And today I decided to make a huge video to answer those questions by talking to you about all of my favorite sample libraries, as someone who's been composing orchestral and cinematic music professionally for years. So this video is going to be very long, so I decided to also leave you a list of all the libraries I'm going to mention in this video, along with timestamps and price information. So you can go in the comments, click on the timestamp of whatever library you're interested in, and skip to the part of the video where I talk about those libraries. Now, I want to share a bit of caveat with you about something that I feel like I need to say, which is this: the library doesn't make the composer. It's one thing to have the great tools, but it's another thing to have great tools and learning how to use them. Which means I am going to tell you all the libraries I use, but don't expect to write legendary music just because you have good libraries. If you decide to buy them, you're gonna need to hone your skill as a composer and have the good libraries. So if you want to learn how to orchestrate, how to write orchestral music in a great way that sounds professional, subscribe to this channel and check out the tutorials I've been putting out for the last couple of years. There are almost 100 free tutorials and I will keep on posting them as time goes. So that's where you can learn. Now, I'm going to assume you already know what a DAW is and what Contact is. Now, if you do not know Contact, it's a sampler with which you can read lots of orchestral libraries. I'm not going to go in depth of how it works. If you want to learn more about Contact, ask Google or ask me in the comments. But now I just want to talk about the libraries I do recommend. The first type of library I want to talk about are the budget libraries and the great libraries to get if you're a beginner. So there are two things I want to say. If you're on a tight budget or you don't want to spend much money on your music production because you're at the beginning and you don't feel like it, cool. You can get a service which is called Composer Cloud, $30 a month. And that's the proof that you don't really need to spend thousands of dollars in your libraries to write orchestral music. Now, for $30 a month, you get the entire EastWest catalog. So, you know, EastWest Symphonic Orchestra, EastWest Hollywood Orchestra, Storm Drum, and all their libraries. So that thing, $30 a month, you can try it. The libraries you get have all the professional standards in them. They're kind of old, so I don't really like to use them, but they sound good and you can start from there if you're a beginner. Now, if you want to invest a bit more, which is something I recommend you to do, the libraries I do recommend you to get are the comprehensive only one bundles. One of the best ones is Metropolis Ark 1. It's great if you want to write epic orchestral music. Now, instead of Metropolis Ark 1, if you want something more balanced, there is Albion 1, which is not as powerful as Metropolis Ark 1, but it's more balanced and both have the full orchestra available in them. So those are two great libraries to get if you're a beginner and you want to invest a bit in your skills. Now let's transition to piano libraries. The one I use the most is the Giant. The Giant is the piano library of my choice. I use it every frigging time and you can hear it in every one of my songs. If you hear a piano, it's the Giant pretty much. And you can hear it a lot in my Apocalypsis Noctis cover that I made 2 years ago or last year, don't remember. Well, that cover sounded something like this. Now, I really like the Giant because it's flexible. Other than having a nice sound, which is this. What I like is that you can also tweak it. So you get, for example, this tone roll here. You can edit how you like it. Anyway, it changes the sound when you play. And you also have this reverb, internal reverb here. You get the anatomy thing here that allows you to change the sound, to shape the sound even more. And if you click on this arrow, there's way more parameters than you thought there were. And in here too, sample libraries in Contact in general, they tend to have these very elegant interfaces that seem minimal, but if you read the manuals, you're gonna notice there's an insane degree of possibilities. So another thing you can do with Giant is just selecting, if you do not know how to use all the parameters, you go here, presets, and you select the preset you want to use. And it kind of changed the sound pretty much, you know? And there's also like strange spacescape presets and something like which is like super weird and ethereal. And so you get lots of things. And for a single piano library, it's pretty much variable and dynamic. Now, the second library used all the time is Metropolis Ark 1. Now, I cannot show you all the library because it's full of patches, but Metropolis Ark 1 is a comprehensive orchestral library. With comprehensive, I mean it contains an insane degree of instruments. You have 4 districts, as they call them. The first district is Orchestra. You have strings and brass. You also have contrabassoons, but that's the only woodwinds you get out of Metropolis Ark. Now, Metropolis Ark 1 is known to have a very insane strength or power. This library was recorded, like all sample libraries are recorded from real instruments. In the case of Metropolis Ark, this one was recorded from forte to fortissimissimo, or fortissimissimissimo, or something like crazy. So it has an inherently loud sound. So if you check out, for example, the C3 note in the low strings patch, it sounds something like this, which is insane for a single note. So Metropolis Ark, use it, like that's the library I use the most in all of my orchestrations because I like the loud orchestral sound. And you can hear it anywhere in my tracks, but a good example of it would be my probably my Capet cover or my The Landing cover even. In my The Landing cover, you can really hear it because it's like 90% of the orchestra. This is what it sounds like. So, yeah, that's the sound of a Metropolis Ark. And you get, as I was saying, strings, brass, and a choir, which sounds bananas. And you also get a few percussion, which I never use because I don't really like. A piano, which I never use because I like the Giant way more. And the band section, which has guitars and bass and drum set. Now, the guitars and bass, I don't like to use those because I like to use my real guitars and bass, which are like back there, but not sure if they're visible. But as for percussion, like the drum set is amazing, and I use it along with the choir in, again, The Landing. If there's a certain part of the song where you hear a crazy drum set in the background and insane choir going on, which goes something like this. That part of the song is like full-on Metropolis Ark pretty much, along with synths from Serum, but that's for later. So Metropolis Ark 1 is really great for the loud stuff, but when it comes to quiet things, it's not so great. So when it comes to those things, I use other libraries I'm going to show you later. But now I actually want to show you one library I just got yesterday. It's Audio Imperia Jaeger. This is an insanely modern sounding library. It comes with strings, brass, percussion, vocals by Merete Soltvedt. I hope that's the right way to pronounce it. Merete is the singer who sang in many Two Steps from Hell Thomas Bergerson songs, and her vocals sound insane in this library. And you also have a sound design section with Trader Brahms and drones and Trader whoosh bangs and those sort of sounds. Now, I just got this library yesterday, so I don't have an example of what this library sounds like in the context of a full song. But I'm going to make a review about this library in the coming weeks because I'm going to try it a lot and try to write a full song with it and then tell you what I think about it in depth. But for now, I want to show you the vocals patch because it's the most mind-blowing thing about this library in my opinion. So this is how Jaeger looks like. And you have multiple articulations here, and the vocals sound something like this. That sounds like it's straight out of Bloodborne, and it's amazing. Now you have multiple articulations, as I said. There's also vocal phrases, which go very loud. There's also, breath and upscales and stuff. So you have like this single vocals patch is insane in its own. You also have sustain, so you can play chords if you want. And that's only one of the, the 5 main categories of sound in this one. You also have strings and brass and stuff like that. This sound pretty good and not as loud as my favorite Metropolis Ark, but they are more dynamic. I get that feeling that they are more balanced. Now, some of these patches the flaw I found is that some of these patches don't have legatos. Others have. Like the most important instruments have legatos. Like violins, cellos have legatos. French horn have legatos, but for example, tubas, I think they don't. And as you're seeing here, violas don't have a legato articulation. But the sound of the library is pretty great. And the thing I love is that, for example, if we go on the tubas, and this is something you have in all the main orchestra patches, this library allows you to shape the sound very easily. You have this knob here, which is reminiscent of damage, which, when triggered, kind of makes your sound lo-fi and stuff. And you can edit the behavior of that knob by going here. But what I wanted to show you is that this library, other than having a pretty great sound, allows you to tweak and sound design your orchestra. So I can create, a sort of a Bram if I want to, just by going on the effects, and I go on the distortion and I, enable it. That's from the library itself, and I was able to do it in 2 seconds. Now, if I go in FL Studio and enable the sound goodizer or something like that, and then I put more reverb from Valhalla onto these tubas, and the thing I love is that you can go here in the pitch and you just do this, So I don't know, you can create awesome things just by using this. Or there's the step sequencer here that allows you to do other things. So, there's so many things that this library lets you do internally. And I really love the flexibility of it. This is very great for writing modern sounding trailer music, for example, or epic music, stuff like that. You also have a percussion section with many different types of percussion. There's like designed version. There's the normal version of those perks and the designed version, which is like processed to sound even more amazing. But I think the points of strength of this library are the vocals, the degree of changes that you can bring to your orchestral instruments, and even the sound design compartment, which itself is like amazing. You get these sort of very, very trailerish sounds, and even Brahms if you want to. So those are just a few examples. There is more. It's all included in a single library at a very, very interesting price right now. So that one is another I love. Third one, a full orchestral bundle, which I don't have, is Albion 1. That one is the library I mentioned before. If you go on their website and listen to the demos, you can get a good idea what it sounds like. A fourth one is Berlin Orchestra Inspire, which is a library I bought just for sketching purposes. It's kind of cheap, maybe not right now. It was cheap when I bought it. Now they increased the price a little bit. And it's just like Metropolis Ark. It has like the full orchestra. You have strings and brass, but you also have woodwinds, and you also have percussion, and I think piano and harp too. Now, this one is a bit more dynamic than Metropolis Ark, but the sound of it is... So the first thing you notice is that the ensembles are even like... In Metropolis Ark, you have ensembles. It's not like split patches. You don't get first violin, second violin, cellos and stuff. You get high strings, low strings, and stuff like this. In Berlin Orchestra Inspire, the ensembles are even less, like give you even less freedom, but they sound good out of the box, kind of, Now, this library is not as precise as the other libraries I showed you, and it doesn't have lots of articulation. This is like a minimal example of what Orchestral Tool libraries are like. And Orchestral Tool is the developer who made Metropolis Ark 1, 2, 3, etc. and Berlin strings and Berlin, whatever. Berlin Orchestra inspires like the baby version of those libraries. So it doesn't have lots of things in it, but it is kind of like versatile in many ways. And it's a perfect sketching tool because it sounds decent out of the box. It doesn't sound legendary. And an example of what a track that I've wrote using Berlin Orchestra Inspire only sounds like is this one. Was a Final Fantasy XIV sort of like mock-up, and that's Berlin Orchestra Inspire. That was all for the only one orchestral bundle type of libraries. Now let's move on to libraries specifically designed for strings. Now I use Metropolis Ark 1 when it comes to strings, but I also use Cinematic Strings 2, which is my library of choice for when it comes to writing, quiet stuff. Now, you can hear Cinematic Strings 2 layered with Metropolis Ark in all of my orchestration pretty much, but it's really noticeable in my Cuphead / Westward cover that I wrote a few months ago, where there is a breakdown and there's some like string ensemble going on. They sound something like this. In that case, I use Cinematic Strings 2. So I use it along with Ark for the quietest parts. Now, Cinematic Strings 2, of course, is only strings. It's not like Ark that has brass and guitars and whatever. But it's more precise and it can get more realistic. It also has a few interesting controls like vibrato control and allows you to set overlays on top of your sustains and stuff like that. And it has these articulations pretty much. And legato and other things that you might learn if you check out the manual. You might learn what they mean. But Cinematic Strings 2, I bought it, and it's not very expensive. It's not even cheap. It's the right price. Although I bought it the week before they announced and released the sequel of this library, which is like Cinematic Studio Strings. So that's the reason why I use Cinematic Strings 2 over Studio Strings. I didn't feel like buying another library and spending another multiple hundreds of euros on it, but I just got this one, and I honestly, from what I heard, I like the sound of Cinematic Strings 2 more than Cinematic Studio Strings, but maybe that's also because I haven't tried Cinematic Studio Strings yet. But yeah, so that's what I use for strings. And another thing I use for strings is Tinago Solo Cello. Now, Tinago Solo Cello, it's a solo cello library, So what I like about this library, apart the fact that the sound of the cello is so good, and it also goes quite high in terms of octaves. So if I use it here, it almost sounds as if it's a viola or something. So when I want to have this sort of expression on solo violas, I might use this one and draw an EQ curve to remove a bit of the lows so it's more sharp like a viola. But the sound of this library is amazing, naturally speaking, and very expressive. I really like it. And you also get a sustain setting here, so you can even play chords if you want. And it has a very nice dynamics, as you heard. And so this is very expressive. And if you use it in certain parts of your songs, it can take over and it can really convey some very interesting lines. And I did that many times throughout many of my songs, but one where it's very noticeable is probably The Landing again. There is a sort of a breakdown where you have some solo cellos going on and sounds something like this. This library comes in two versions, actually. There is this solo cello legato, which only has a legato and sustain articulation. And there's also Tinaguo, like solo cello complete or something, where you have more articulations, but I only have this version personally. And there's the effects tab that allows you to, first set your internal reverb, but you also can set delay, compressor, and solid EQ. And you can, put it to mono or stereo with this fader here. So those are the things you can do. And you can change the picture of Tina Go if you want to, you know, if you prefer this one. But that's just, you know, aesthetically pleasing. Anyway, now, other than that, I just got this new library for the strings, CineStrings Solo. It's from the same guys who made Tina Go Solo Cello Legato, but I do prefer Tina Go Solo Cello Legato. This one, though, contains all the rest of the instruments. So you have solo violins, solo violas, and solo cellos, and solo basses and stuff. And sounds something like this. Sorry, I need to enable the legato. Much thinner compared to Tina Go Solo Cello, and in my opinion, way less expressive. So that's why I love Tina Go Solo Cello more. But I use this one library, and as you see here, it has many controls though. So it's not as if it's not professional and not well recorded, not well programmed. It's just that in terms of natural sound, I prefer the Tina Go sound. Now, with any CineStrings, CineHarp, CineWinds, etc., you tend to have these mixer presets that if you change them, kind of changes the sound of your library a bit. And you also have these pages of settings. And I made a review about this one, and you can hear me using this particular library on the solo violins of my Final Fantasy VIII Don't Be Afraid cover, which sounded something like this. Violin things you heard are from CineStrings Solo. Then that's pretty much all for the strings. Those are the libraries I tend to use for the strings. Now let's move on to the brass libraries. For the brass, I still use Metropolis Ark 1 a lot, as you can hear in this example of my Hans Zimmer cover of Dream is Collapsing. And there's also another library I recently got, which is, 8-diode Century Brass, sorry. Now, Century Brass comes with pretty much 3 instruments. Like, there's 2 versions, actually. Century Brass Ensembles and Century Brass, like, soloist instruments. I only got the Ensembles one, and it's not cheap, it's not even expensive. I think the price is very right for this library. You get lots of articulations for each instrument. And the 3 instruments you get are horns, like the French horns, bass trombones, and trumpets. This library can be heard in my the track, like the sonic cover that I started to compose in the Track from Scratch episode I posted like a few weeks ago. And that track sounded something like in the brass in that track was like 99% Century Brass, and it sounded something like this. Century Brass, the interface is very minimal. That's what I like to see. When the interface is minimal, everything is, it's clear where things are, and the sound. Oh. You can, for example, tweak the legato volume. So if I put this to max, you can also tweak the release tails and the speed and the expression and dynamics. And yeah, what I liked about this one are dynamics. Now, they are more noticeable on certain instruments more than others. I like them a lot in the bass trombones personally, and you can hear those in my sonic cover again. But yeah, so you also have like interesting articulation, flutter tongue, and triple tongues, or rips. So it's a very comprehensive library, lots of articulation here. Maybe there are some clusters too, but didn't use them in this patch. And yeah, you can set up your own key switches and stuff. That's what I did. And you have multiple microphones, an equalizer, and this, I guess, is for reverb. Didn't use it though. And there's also the effects tab, which has lots of things, and you can randomize or use presets and stuff. So you can even do some sound design with this library without using external plugin, but I tend to prefer to do that with external plugins. So you have horns, and you have, a 6 horns patch, 2 horns, 12 horns. Each one has a different sound, sometimes different articulations. And you're gonna see me use this library way more. I just got it a few weeks ago, but that's a keeper because played with Metropolis Ark, which again has very loud sounds, but it's not very great at low dynamics. This one is actually pretty great at low dynamics, so I will use them together. So 8 diode Century Brass, definitely recommended it for brass. It's amazing, and it's kind of new, so yeah. Let's talk now about choir libraries. Now, you heard before a few examples of Metropolis Ark 1, where you also heard a choir. That is my favorite choir library I have, Metropolis Ark 1. But there is also Oceania. This is a choir library from Performance Samples, and I used it a lot in my Bloodborne/Hans Zimmer cover, which sounded something like this. The reason why I love Oceania is that it sounds amazing out of the box. So this one is a library with a single articulation, which is something of an hybrid between sustain, staccatos, and marcatos. Depending on how you play it, it changes into one of those. So if I do this, it's still loading, so it's not playing correctly, but it's very easy to play along, and it doesn't need lots of processing to make it sound good. Although the volume is a bit lower here because I lowered it for reasons. But yeah, you heard it on my Hans Zimmer track, and it didn't take lots of effort to make it sound like this. Another library for choir that I use sometimes is StormChoir 2. Haven't used it in a long time actually, but that one too is a pretty good choir library. It's a bit old too, so that's why I don't use it a lot, because being older is a bit more daunting to program it in a way that it makes sense. But one thing I loved about this one though is the degree of dynamics it has. Like it can go very, very quiet. Like it's almost a whisper. Anyway, the thing is that, as I mentioned, it's a bit old, so it's a bit daunting to program it, but it comes with the necessary, like you have multiple mic positions and you can, do a bit of word building. So this one, I used it in a Skyrim sketch I wrote once, which sounded something like this. Choir there is entirely StormChoir 2. The percussion was damaged. That's a good example for damage actually. So that's what I use for the choir sometimes. There's also a Vocalisa for the choir. This one is like Middle Eastern choir or something like that. And since it's a very niche sound, I don't use it a lot, but I was wanted to play a Harry Potter song. But anyway, I really like the sound of it because some of the syllables in some patches are very interesting, like this one. You don't really hear them a lot in normal choir libraries. This has definitely a Middle Eastern vibe to it, and I used it as a solo choir in the background of the breakdown of my track codename Highwind that sounded something like this. That's Vocalisa. It's from Impact Soundworks. Then, as for the Woodwinds, I just recently got CineWinds CORE, which you can hear it too in my Sonic example. It's the same concept really as, CineStrings solo, in the way it allows you to set up your articulations and stuff like that. The cool thing about those two, like the CineStrings and CineWinds, is that you can set up your articulations with key switches and with both key switches and other conditions. So in the case of, for example, this patch of piccolos in CineWinds, the short articulation are 3. There's short 1/2, short 1/4, and short 1/8. Depending on how strong I press the note, it's gonna play one of those 3. So if I press the note very, very strong, it's gonna play a short note that lasts for 1/2 of, one half of the beat, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, I don't remember the exact term, but yeah, if I play a very low velocity, it's gonna be faster. And that's given by the second condition here. You see velocity as a second condition for the key switch. If the range of the velocities goes from 0 to 70 for the note I played, then it's gonna play this articulation. If it goes from 71 to 100, it's gonna play the 1/4. If it goes to 101 to 137, which are the loudest, it's gonna play a long sustained notes, 1/2 note. So that's one thing that you can do with CineSample libraries that I really love. So that's one thing I like about CineWinds, and it comes with mixer presets too, and just like the others. Now the sound of this one is kind of good, but it's also kind of old. Like this library, I think it's from 2011. So yeah, it's been 7 years, and you can kind of hear it, and it's better than nothing though. Now, as for percussion are one of my favorite type of instruments, and the library I use for those is the main library I use usually is Damage, which is not alright. This guy, which is a library of super powerful. Well, it's weird to play it like this, but whatever. This library. You can hear it in all of my songs pretty much, and it's either you use the main as a main thing or as a layer. So yeah, percussions, I personally tend to use them layered, but Damage is pretty great. It's like the foundation of all my hybrid percussive patterns. The cool thing about it is, other than having lots of ensembles, you also have patches of trailer-ish hits like these guys. So what I did is I went and I extracted all of those and memorized them into this Damage samples folder, I think. No? Where is it? Heavyocity DAMAGE. So I have all the sounds, extracted, so I can just, put them here and just do my layers. And another thing you get are, other sounds like this. Drones, atmospheric sounds. And another thing I loved are, I'm not sure if I have them here, but Damage also comes with loops. No, I don't have them here. And those are really amazing to use too. So let's open a loops patch. Rhythmic suits, loop menus, and you can choose, there's many categories and you can choose what category you like. But anyway, the loops. I think they fit the BPM you set to the project. So if I slow this down, there's an insane amount of loops like this one. What I like to do is to record them with Edison, which is like the audio editor of FL Studio, export them, and then change, do some resampling and change a few things to make the loop really my own and tweak the rhythm in such a way that it fits in my track. Because one thing I hate to do is to have a loop and have to base the entire track on that loop, or to have a track and insert a loop that wasn't made for that track. So having rhythmic mismatches, that's very poor in my opinion. What I like to do is to have a bit of control on the loops, so I tend to mangle it and cut it, stretch it, whatever, in a way that it fits to my ideas. That's what I do personally. That's resampling. Now with Damage, you get lots of loops like this one. And all of these are loops in just one category, And as you see, there's many categories, so you can imagine the amount of loops you get. So it's percussive kits. You also have like even drum kits and stuff like that. There's also trailer hits, trailer drones, and loops into one single library. This is probably, along with Metropolis Ark, one of the best libraries ever made, in my opinion, because of the sheer diversity you get. Now, other than that, you also get another thing it allows you to do is to manage the way your percussion is like. Sorry. The way your percussion is sitting into the room. So if you go here in the stage, in the patches, it allows you to change the position, you know, for each single percussive strike. So you can remap your whole kit throughout the room however you want to. And that's freaking amazing. So damage, it's not cheap, but it's for what you get, the price is freaking right. Definitely worth the price. Oh, damage is from Heavyocity, and yeah, a good example of where I used it is literally all of my tracks. And I'm gonna think of one, show you here. But I usually layer it with other things. So damage is very powerful for hybrid percussion, but when it comes for organic stuff, more orchestral and more quiet and dynamic, I tend to use Rhapsody orchestral percussion, which is exactly that. Now, I don't think I ever used this one alone because I like to have those like hybrid, epic, huge percussion, and I wouldn't be able to, you know, get those sounds with this one. Although this one is very nice. It has nice timpani, nice snares and cymbals. Especially I use this one a lot for cymbals. So you can hear it. Like these are the timpani. Or you can hear the cymbals and a bit of the timpani and stuff in my Cuphead cover in the percussion. And they sounded something like this. With Rhapsody, you get mic positions again. Like generally speaking, you tend to get them with any, you know, good enough percussion. But yeah, you get mic positions here. You have an internal reverb, EQ, ADSR, and you get like many different type of orchestral percussion. All the main orchestral percussion that you would find in a real orchestra, not those like Damage, which are processed sound of people smashing cars and stuff, which are way better for hybrid music. Those are two different breeds of percussive sounds. And they work, for that reason, they work nicely together, in my opinion. So I use this along with Damage. Then I also use Dio, Epic Toms, and Epic Dhol ensembles. Epic Toms and Epic Dhols, they have this interface, which again is very minimal, very, you know, intuitive. But I never actually used any of this. Like, I never used the sequencer, never used the envelope and the effects and EQ. I just used the natural sound. This is Epic Tom. Very weird to play it this way. And then there's Epic Dhol, which is like its brother. And I tend to use them together. Sometimes I use one, sometimes I use another, and other times I use them like both together. But yeah, my table is like rumbling. But yeah, I cannot use them a lot. Layer them with Damage and Rhapsody orchestral percussion. Epic Dhols also comes with loops, I just found out. Interesting. Didn't know that. Although they don't really sound that much impressive to me, I just use the percussive kits. You can really hear those along with Rhapsody in my Cuphead remix, but also in the Pirates of the Caribbean sketch that I've been working on. And it's on hold right now, but it sounded something like this. And that's that for the percussion. Now, other than that, Let's now move on to the hybrid trailer-ish stuff. One thing I use a lot is Juggernaut. I use this one for a couple of things. So the first thing, synthesizers. You have this sort of synth with wavetables, which are already made. And you get an ADSR, so you can shape the sound and make it whatever you want to. But you also get the effects, and you can distort the thing, and you can do whatever you like. But yeah, that's for another video anyway. Like, I'm not gonna show you how to synthesize the sound. But as for the rest of Juggernaut, the reason why I love Juggernaut so much is that it comes with an insanely varied collection of web samples of trailer-ish sounds. So for example, this one. Or this. Or you got reverses like, I don't know, this guy. Or this guy. You also get risers. Like this one. And, all kinds of sound. You also get textures, which are like drones. And drops. So this sort of trailer-ish sound, this library was the first that introduced me to like trailer music in general. So you get those. And there's also a few percussive sounds that you get. And a good example of where I use this is actually a track called Armored Pride. And I wrote this one after getting that one library. I'm not going to play the whole track, but an example of what it sounds like is probably this one. This whole thing, like the synths and the percussion, like the sort of percussive sounds and the drums and brams, that's 100% Juggernaut. And I wrote this one in 2014 when I got Juggernaut, actually. It was to test this new library, and I use it to this day still, because I really love it. Then other than Juggernaut, I also use, for the trailer effects, Boom Library Cinematic Trailers Designed, the first one, which is probably one of my favorite trailer effects libraries that you can hear in all of my songs pretty much. When you hear trailer effects, a part of them is really Boom Library. So something like that. So you get whoosh hits and whooshes. There's also risers, very organic too. Or this. You also have low hits. Sort of atmospheric hit. So that's that. I also have used, very recently I got AVA Instinct, which is the same thinking as Boom Library. Very tiny library, but it has the good stuff. And the samples have very funny names like Charizard. The thing I like about this one were the loops. You can really cut them and then, resample them and use them in your tracks. I did that in my Don't Be Afraid track in a certain part. I think it was this one. So AVA Instinct is very, very powerful, very trending also. Lots of my trailer music composer friends are using it. Other than AVA Instinct, there's also scenes from the Multiverse from Audio Imperia, which is similar, and it was the first library from Audio Imperia, which was amazing, Sorry, it's from the composer and sound designer Juggernaut, which is a friend of mine who's he made the trailers for I don't know, for probably 200 or 300 movies and games. That is mental, and he's an incredible composer. very versatile at that. He can also produce electronic music, but his real talent is like sound design. And this library contains a handful of samples from the man himself, which once they got released, they defined the trailer music world. I compose music, trailer music as a job, you know? And I remember when this one came out, everyone was using those samples. For example, this one. You can hear it in so many trailer songs. It's been, you know, used and mangled in so many ways. It's insane. You have these stretched effects, libraries, sounds. You also have risers. Then there's also reverse effects. Very interesting. And you get booms. And Brahms. You know, so that one is very, very nice. And it also has downers and stuff like that. So audio Imperia scenes from the Multiverse. The most impressive thing about this library is that it's cheap as hell. So if you don't have it and you want cool trailer effects, that's a library to get. There's also Keep Forest, Evolution Atlantica, and Evolution Dragon, which are the same concept. And I do prefer the other ones I mentioned though. Then I also have Hybrid Tools 2 from a Dio, which is the one I use a lot for my taiko roll. There's also sounds that are kind of horror, like the super screams. Which I definitely do not want to know how they were recorded. There's also super hits. And other categories like mega horns, etc. And I personally mostly use this one for taiko rolls and whooshes. But if you like to write horror trailer tracks, Hybrid Tools 2 is full of horror-ish sound. And there's also Hybrid Tools 3, which was the most regrettable purchase for me because it let me down immensely as a library. But I cannot say good things about this library because I don't like it a lot, but I did use it. Sometimes it can create nice atmosphere in your tracks. That's the good thing about it. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for all the libraries I use, except I forgot to mention Shredders. Shredders is sort of like scenes from the Multiverse, but it has weirder sounds like this one. Like neural type of sounds, and it also has very interesting pulses. You can hear those in my codename Highwind track, especially in the beginning of it. And yeah, it also has drones and stuff. And Brahms. Really like this one. I use it sometimes, but not every time because it has a very peculiar sound to it. So yeah, that's one I use. And then I tend to use custom samples. When I say custom samples, I mean stuff like this, which is not actually custom. It's just samples that I made by merging together many different samples of all the libraries I showed you and exported into one single sample. So for example, Falcon Punch here. This is like Boom Library combined with Juggernaut combined with something else. I put many samples together and merged them into a single one. And these are my sort of custom samples. You know, that's what I call them. But they're actually just layers I made in different ways. And I have trailer hits done like this. I have risers done like this. I also have drones and a bit of pulses and stuff like that. Okay, so that was all for my orchestral libraries. I need to give a huge thanks to the amazing people who are supporting me on Patreon and are making it possible for me to keep on running this channel. If you do not know, you can support me on Patreon and get awesome rewards back, like the multi-track stems of all my tracks that I publish on YouTube. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to learn actually how to compose orchestral music, other than learning what libraries I use, on this channel I post music tutorials about orchestral music pretty much every week, so you might want to subscribe and recommend it to a friend who might get some help out of it. So yeah, that would be all for this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.